Hello, everyone. This is the Sleeping Wendigo, and welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Talks. And with me today is my co-host, Cryptic Chills HQ. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing alright. I'm really excited about this episode as it is the mascot of my channel.
Yes, it is. And tonight will be going over the Yeti, or as it's also known as the Abominable Snowman.
Now, I know a lot of people hear that name, and I know, like, you and I originally, we kind of both went, that doesn't make sense for the Yeti. But I did find a little bit of knowledge. We're going to link all of our uh, sources down below. But I did find a little bit of knowledge as to why it was originally called the Abominable Snowman. It was actually believed originally that Yetis were very friendly and super nice. They were actually almost human-like from the original stories anyway. And there was a journalist in 1921, Henry Newman, that interviewed members of an expedition to Mount Everest. They told him of this creature that their guides spoke of, the Medokami, or Medokangi. Kangmi. Holy shit, I can't talk today.
I believe you said the name correctly.
Yeah, Medokangmi.
Mostly.
Medokangmi. But the um the the name actually translates to man bear snowman. But Newman translated it as filthy snowman. He didn't particularly like filthy, so he changed it to abominable snowman, and people kind of just ran with it, and suddenly the Yeti was not so nice.
It's kind of similar to another name called Kang Admi, which translates to snowman.
Yes.
So originally they thought they were friendly, and where was this person from again?
This was so it doesn't say where the journalist was originally from, but these stories they were interviewed from an expedition to Mount Everest. I can find out
Okay.
where this journalist was from real quick if you want, though.
So the original stories were that it was friendly, almost human-like, and when the journalists came through, they changed the story of it being a monster.
Kinda, sort of. He just the only reason he didn't like filthy snow, or the only reason it got changed to abominable snowman was he didn't like the translation of filthy snowman. Even though that wasn't the exact translation, it was man bear snowman.
Tibetan lore describes three main varieties of Yetis: the Naelmo, which have black fur and is the largest and quote unquote fiercest, standing around 15 feet tall. The Shuti, which stands at around 8 feet tall and lives 8,000 to 10,000 feet above the sea level. And the Rangshimbambo, which have reddish brown fur and is only 3 to 5 feet tall. Huh. So I didn't know there was three different varieties that were cited. And another thing that I find weird is they didn't describe what fur color the Shuti have, but they described it for the Nyelmo and the Rangshembambo. I believe I'm pronouncing both of those right.
Yeah, just I believe that is the correct pronunciation. If not, it's very close. I'm not very good with
Then
Tibetan pronunciation.
I neither. It makes me wonder if the Shuti are the ones that everyone sees that has the grayish white fur,
Yeah.
but it doesn't exactly say. But we do know the Nyelmo are black furred, which I have heard of a few sightings about a black furred Yeti. But I haven't heard of any about a 3 to 5 foot tall Yeti called the Rangshimbambo.
Yeah, that one's an interesting
Um,
one. I want to look more into that at some point for a video on my channel about the different types of Yetis.
Oh, definitely. That seems like something that should be interesting.
Um, so a lot of people, and this is where the not really confusion comes in, but this is where a lot of people kind of know them from is from, for one, popular culture like, Scooby Doo and video games, storybooks. You've probably heard of the Abominable Snowman at some point, which is,
I mean,
the Yeti.
even in the 1960 something movie of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, there is a Yeti in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and belief goes way back. I mean, hell, even Germany was looking. Germany sent their they shall not be named, but Germany sent their one of their military groups to go hunt the Yeti. I mean, there was a let me find this article real quick. It's right here. Um yeah, there was a young zoologist, Ernest Schaefer, that both, and this was, 1936 Germany, so that'll tell you exactly which military group was looking for this Yeti. But
Hmm.
um, even back then, like both the U.S. and Germany were trying to court Ernest Schaefer for his scientific and hunting know-how, and he later even called this his biggest mistake because he chose poorly. But he was summoned back to Germany in 1936. Then he was sent on a expedition to the Himalayas to find a race, or a believed race that had been destroyed when a moon collided with the Earth. Um,
Mm.
Wendigo will get into the moon here in a little bit and what exactly that came from. But the
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic that I have planned for that.
this is a direct quote. The expedition returned to Germany with thousands of dead bird eggs, pelts, insects, and artifacts, along with what the Guardian said was a taxidermy bear that was believed to be, but albeit only by some, but it was believed to be proof of the Yeti. Now, this is another direct quote. And this is funny, I want to read this as is. Did the Nazis really believe it was? No, says Texas A&M University. George M. Gonzalez, or Texas University's George M. Gonzalez, Schaefer spent a good bit arguing that it wasn't a Yeti at all, but a Tibetan bear. And this is the funniest quote I've ever heard from an article like this. And I quote, "There's no word on how bummed Hitler was."
Well, there was a lot of theories about Hitler messing around with anything mythological at the time. I believe there was even a thing where him and his army was looking for UFOs at the time.
Yeah, I did think I heard something about that, but that is definitely for a future
Completely,
episode.
that will definitely be for a future podcast episode. So when we get around to that one, we'll definitely dig some more into that.
Yeah.
As for the moon that Cryptic mentioned, there was a small planet that did hit the Earth when it was forming. It's actually the reason why we have our moon today. The planet was called Theia, and around 100 million years after Earth formed, so before there was anything on it, it was literally just a molten rock at this point, Theia decided it was going to crash into it, which caused our moon to form.
Yeah.
Which have some kind of correlation with the Yeti myth about the moon destroying a entire race.
Yeah. And that would be kind of like really interesting to look into. Possibly for like future. I did think about doing an episode with you about like extinct races from the cryptozoology side of thing.
Oh, there's definitely a lot of those. Some of them I'm even looking into making entire videos about.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things I did want to bring up is that the Yeti is actually believed to be like a cousin or a brother to, Bigfoot or the Sasquatch family of cryptids.
Most likely in the same family. Since I do study a lot of paleontology, it would make sense to me if they were in the same genus. There are a couple species that we do know existed at one point that would fit well in this. One group being the Australopithecines, which are a group of apes that walked upright that lived in Africa. Uh, these apes, however, were not very large, reaching about possibly 3 to 4 feet tall on average, and were hunted pretty badly by certain animals at the time, most notably Homotherium, which was a genus of saber-toothed cats.
That's really interesting.
So it would make sense that these could be larger cousins or even in the same family as Australopithecines. So, and since there's almost at least some kind of Bigfoot variety on almost every single continent, I mean, we have the Yeren for either China, Australia, we have the Yowie, we of course have the Yeti that we're talking about, and we have the most famous one, Bigfoot.
Yeah. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, Bigfoot itself is its own category of um, Sasquatch. It's not like the generic name for Sasquatch, which, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of people confuse, like, oh, it's a Bigfoot, or oh, it's a Sasquatch. That means the same thing.
Sasquatch normally is derived for some things on either the west or east coast. There are certain in particular groups, like for example the skunkape of Florida, and there's even a variety of Sasquatch-like creatures that the Cherokee happily were fond of calling the Cherokee Devils. But normally, when people think of Bigfoot, they think of giant upright ape, which unfortunately they usually throw Yeti, the Yahweh, the Urine, and all these other varieties into the same thing. Which, to be granted, a lot of sightings of the quote unquote wild man are pretty much the same giant, upright, hairy ape that's able to use incredible strength and pretty much tends to hide from people. I believe there was even a video that was caught by construction workers back in 2015, I believe, and it was a very foggy video, but you could see the outline of something picking up a tree and throwing it 40 feet.
Yeah, I still have that rule. If it can throw a tree at me, I don't go near it.
Yeah, I would believe anything in that category is a stay away from it.
Yeah. So I did want to talk about like the origins of the Yeti, because Yetis have been around a long time. I mean, like I said, even the Nazi Party was trying to find the Yeti. But
Yeah.
the Yeti actually dates back way further than that. I mean, some of the earliest mentions are in Tibetan and Nepalese manuscripts, before writing on paper was big.
Yeah, that's also true. I believe the Sherpa mentioned them quite a bit.
Yes. So in the Himalayan communities, the Yeti actually does hold a lot of like cultural significance and cultural importance. Local folklore to the Himalayans actually depicts these creatures as a sort of guardian that was both respected and feared by the people of the Himalayan communities. But over time, the Yeti lore has kind of evolved and incorporated elements of spirituality and environmentalism And it kind of, at least in my opinion, it does reflect a lot of like the relationship between man and nature all over the world, not just specifically these regions, but all over the world, because you've got a lot of that with like the, like you mentioned, the skunk ape, where people kind of have that element of like environmentalism, or I don't know if you've seen Mountain Monsters.
I've seen the show a few times.
Yeah, but there's a lot of like talk of that in any of the creatures that they hunt, where you've got to kind of respect these creatures for as powerful as they are. I mean, like you mentioned, the Yeti has been, there's been stories of Yetis throwing freaking trees at people just because it
I
was
mean,
too close.
there's even a couple stories. Back in like back in the 90s, of a couple hunters even trying to shoot one, and the bullet didn't even phase the darn thing. But then we have
Yeah,
other, but then we have other stories of hunters supposedly killing a juvenile, but never showing any evidence. And it's kind of like, which is it? Is it hard to kill with a bullet, or is it just no one just grabs the body after they shoot it?
one of the things that I do see a lot of in like the lore is people talking about how, there's one Yeti. Not that it's its own creature. It's not one Yeti, it's a creature called Yeti. It's almost a kind of like a breed, I guess would be the right way to put that. A breed of
More
yeah.
more species, not breed. It would be
Yes.
more species.
Yes. I was
And
thinking breed because I mean it's a part of the Sasquatch family.
from the stories that I've seen, its description is similar, but there are differentiations in descriptions that it could potentially be its own species. Plus, it's on completely different continents than Bigfoot itself. Normally, if an animal in the same genus is on a completely different continent, unless the animal was brought there by human intervention, the animal is most likely a different species. Like, for example, there are certain foxes in Africa. For example, I believe the fennec fox is one of them, and we have our own fox species here in the Americas, like the red fox or the gray fox. Same genus, completely different species.
Yes.
And I did hear some reports that they are thinking that the Yetis spend most of their time up in the mountains, but will come down to the actual valleys in between them to forage, which is what a lot of animals in that area tend to do. Uh, the bears in the area will do that, and so will certain large herbivores.
Yeah.
Like they'll travel in between from mountain to mountain and going into the valleys in between, searching for edibles, and then going back up into the Alps to go to different areas. Not Alps, the Himalayas. My mistake.
Ah, no worries. I knew what you were talking about. So, one of the one of the things I see a lot is like people talking about we were actually just talking about it, but the origins of the Yeti. And I see a lot of like different cultures that believe in it, from, we were just talking about it, to the Tibetan culture, the, you know, the right, the Alps. Yeah.
Hmm. True.
And I mean I'm seeing Lepcha myth and lore, um even the Buddhists have a version of the Yeti in their belief system. And it seems like from what I'm seeing, every major belief system has a version of the Yeti. Albeit most of them look, from what I'm seeing, and I will link this. This is from the Earth Stories website that I sent you Wendigo.
All
But
right.
if you go through and you actually look, like each, it seems like each different culture has a different version of the Yeti that looks completely different from another.
That would most cases that's because of cultural differentiations and not normally a exact interpretation of what people were seeing.
Yeah.
Normally, cultural differences will have an influence on what a group of peoples will see. It's kind of like the boogeyman effect thing. Like if you have a feeling you're going to see it, you're going to practically see it.
Yes.
Like it's kind of like if you go into a haunted house or an old house expecting to see a ghost, and you hear an old creak, you're going to think it's a ghost.
Yeah, and so one thing that not a lot of people do know about me is I am a paranormal investigator as well. So that would your uh kind of mention of like going into old houses and seeing ghosts, that is why most paranormal investigators worth their salt rely on their equipment rather than personal experience to say, hey, this place is haunted. And I do say most because
That's
I
okay.
do know a lot of paranormal investigators out there. Hell, I've worked with some that rely more on their personal experience or even like psychics and stuff like that. For me and my team, we typically take the more scientific, like the TAPS team approach, relying on, audio and video evidence versus, and even like EMF field, stuff like that, relying on that kind of evidence and our gear over our personal experience of hearing something, creak and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a difference between a piece of equipment picking up something that's weird instead of someone hearing something weird and just going along with their ear instead of what the equipment is saying.
Yeah.
Then again, there are in terms of how this evolves around Bigfoot or Yeti, there are some things that would suggest there's something out there. There is a video that I've seen. I don't remember where exactly I've seen it, but there was a lot of talk going about it at the time where it was someone who was in a hunting stand, and you can hear what sounds like two individuals of something yelling in a language that doesn't make any sense. It isn't any of the Native American languages, and it certainly isn't any languages that humans typically speak.
I think I
But
know
you
which
could
one you're talking
clearly,
about. Yeah.
like, you could hear what sounds like two individuals fighting over something.
Yeah, but it was in a language that was, I almost want to call it a dead language.
And I mean, if it even is a language, I mean, for all we know, it could have just been two animals yelling at each other because here in the U.S., you can probably attest to this because certain animals will sound like people. For example, you'll have a fox that'll sometimes sound like a woman, and even other people have described stuff like bobcats and mountain lions making human-like noises.
Well, I mean, even the white-tailed deer. I don't know if you've ever heard a white-tailed deer fawn like scream. It sounds like a child crying.
I've heard a fawn yell a couple of times. It does sound eerily like a human child screaming. It's kind of creepy, actually.
It is very creepy, especially when you're in the middle of the night, in the middle of the woods, with nothing around, and all of a sudden you start hearing a baby cry.
That could be not to get off topic off of the Yeti, but it could be another reason why another cryptid that's supposedly in the U.S. has been having reports and sightings lately, which are the water babies.
The water babies, I know the skinwalkers can do that as well.
So it seems like a lot of stuff. I mean, then again, it could be the human mind just making us think it's something else. There's a term I'm trying to think of it at the moment. it'll come to my head in a little bit. But there's a term that people will try to interpret either what an item looks like a certain face, or we'll hear something and it'll make it sound like a human.
Yes. Yeah, I can't think of the word off the top of my head either.
I'll have to look it up real quick. But back in let's see, it was 1957. An adventurer by the name of Ton Slick led an expedition into the Nepal, more specifically the Himalayas, to investigate Yeti reports, and he took an anthropologist called Charleston S. Coon as one of its members. Uh, in 1959, supposed Yeti feces were collected by one of the Slick's expeditions. Fecal analysis found a parasite which could not be classified, which I think that's kind of weird. They found a parasite in the fecal matter, but they couldn't classify what it was.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
But later on, the U.S. government thought that finding Yeti was likely enough to create the U.S. government thought that we would find a Yeti, so they made three rules for American expeditions searching for it: obtain a Nepalese permit, do not hurt the Yeti unless it's self-defense, and let the Nepalese government approve any news reportings on the animal's discovery.
Yeah.
So even the U.S. government, to an extent, thinks that there is something out there in the Himalayas.
Yeah, and you see a lot of that back home too, where the U.S. We were talking about this, I think, before the podcast started. The U.S. was looking into a couple different things.
The FBI was looking into Bigfoot sightings, but according to their results, they never found anything. And they released a full article on what they were searching for, and they never gave away any kind of evidence, as they didn't even find anything, at least in the area they were looking for, and I believe it was a national park.
Yeah.
But another thing that's weird is there have been a few hairs that a couple people have found and sent into scientific to go in for testing, and it did show that it was primate in origin, but they never gave what kind of primate. So for all we know, it could have been an escaped ape of some kind. Like, for example, in Virginia back in the 1950s, I believe, there was a train that crashed and a bunch of gorillas ended up getting loose. They were never captured. But since gorillas are from Africa, they're not used to harsh winters. So I hate to say it, and plus I live here in Virginia, there's definitely not a population of gorillas in the area. That's definitely not it. The incident did happen, but the gorillas are long gone.
I did just find a kind of interesting story I wanted to read for you guys. This is called The Grateful Yeti. The story is quite common among a lot of cultures across the Himalayan communities.
So around in Nepal and all those areas?
Yeah. And according to this, it possesses several variants across those communities as well. In this legend, a Tibetan Buddhist yogi wandered through the mountains. Then one day, he was crippled by an attack of gout, and he was unable to walk. He established himself in a pleasant place at the edge of a forest, where he found some goats who eventually followed him everywhere like pets. There he remained. On the other side of the hill were some abandoned shacks. Every day he would see a huge dark man coming and going between the shacks and the river. Apart from this, there was no other sign of life. One week, he no longer noticed this strange neighbor on his daily walk. Having become intrigued by that mysterious man and feeling a bit better, the yogi decided to investigate the man's dilapidated dwelling. Instead, the yogi was startled coming face to face with a Maigo, or a wild man, as Tibetans call the Yeti. The hirsute behemoth was lying outstretched on the floor, eyes closed and fangs apart, seemingly unaware of the intrusion. He was feverish and obviously ill. One of the Yeti's feet was grossly swollen and full of pus. The yogi immediately noticed, protruding from the infected area of the vast foot, a sharp splinter of wood that could easily be removed. He thought, I know he can jump up and devour me at any moment, but now that I have come this far, I might as well try to help the poor creature. While he gently extracted the long splinter, the Yeti, aware that the llama was helping him, lay as still as a patient etherized upon an offering. English, motherfucker, do you speak it? Apparently
Don't
not.
worry, sometimes words are hard to pronounce.
Words are hard. As a patient etherized upon an operating table. The kindly yogi cautiously cleaned away the pus. He washed the wound using his own saliva, and then bandaged the bizarre foot with a rag torn from his own clothing. On tiptoe, he left the Yeti, returning to his goats, which were tied to a tree in the forest. Days afterward, he saw the Yeti limping down the river, presumably for water, and then slowly returning to his house. Eventually, the creature's gait improved to the point where he could walk without difficulty. Miraculously enough, the yogi's crippling gout had also begun to subside, so that his painful stride began to return to normal, until he too was completely cured. After that, he no longer saw the Yeti. One day, the ferocious Yeti suddenly leaped down like a giant gorilla from the trees, grimaced at the yogi, then sprang back into the trees and was gone. A few days later, the same thing happened, but this time the Yeti was carrying a dead tiger on his shoulder. Placing the magnificent carcass in front of the yogi, as if a token of his gratitude, he again bounded off into the dense jungle. The yogi did not wish to eat the meat, but he skinned the beautiful beast with meticulous care. Eventually, upon his return to the Shen monastery, he offered the splendid tiger skin to the monastery for use during tantric rites.
So he helped the Yeti, and in turn the Yeti gave him pretty much something for helping him.
Yes. And there's been a lot of stories that I've seen of that throughout the years of like researching the Yeti and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into all of them on this podcast because we certainly do not have enough time for that.
I'm sure we can probably do a part 2 to this at some point, if that is, like if we wanted to get into more sightings and more stories instead of the whole creature itself.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So, but that also does play into they're not vicious creatures and they're more human-like than people originally thought.
Mm-hmm.
That is if the creature actually exists, but from the fact that even ancient peoples of the time even supposedly seen it. And like I normally say, every legend has some kind of shred of truth to it.
Yeah, every legend has to come from somewhere. To quote the great Supernatural.
Yeah. So, in terms of what started the legend, who could say? Maybe there was a group of people who were abnormally large. There's even a story similar here in the Americas with Bigfoot, saying that the Sasquatch itself used to be a tribe of cannibalistic humans.
Yeah.
That just turned monstrous over the years. I can't think of the exact term they used for it. I'm sure I can find it if I looked it up real quick, but the natives did think that Bigfoot was a tribe of people. They were just more monstrous than the rest of them. According to the legend, they eventually started hiding away at night. And this results into similar sightings that results in Ape Canyon and the Ape Canyon incident here in the U.S., where a group of miners decided they were going to try to mess around in Ape Canyon looking for gold, and they accidentally pissed off a group of Sasquatches who literally knocked the hell out of one of them with a rock. This is after, of course, the men were startled by them and shot one and killed it. They never found the body.
Yeah, I mean, even then, they're like we were just talking that these sightings go way back. I mean, I'm seeing, you know, written sightings all the way back from like the Tang Dynasty, 1618 CE. I mean, you're talking these
Way back.
yeah, these sightings have been around for a long time.
Yeah, like a lot of these, the other places that supposedly have creatures similar to it, like Central Asia, the United Kingdom, the Philippines, hell, even here in the U.S., the peoples there had ancient writings, or in the Native Americans' case, cave paintings of large human hairy like beings.
Yeah.
But it does make me wonder if there is something out there that people are seeing. I mean, for all we know, it could be uh potential misidentification. For example, there are bears in the area. Like a lot of the areas where supposed Sasquatch like beings are sighted, there is a local bear species. Like here in the US, we got three different species of bear that could result in it. We have polar bears up north, and we have the black and grizzly bear down towards the south in the middle of the US. In a few other countries, like even in Nepal, they have the Tibetan bear.
Yeah, I know for like PA, we have the black bears that people are constantly seeing, hell, I've seen it. Black bears walking around on two legs. Like just walking on two legs. I had one that walked across my yard not too long ago like that.
And yeah, they are known to do that, but it's just something they do. But they don't do it for a long time, and it's completely different from stuff like the Patterson Gibson film that we have, where the bear's walking is nothing like what the animal in that video showed.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not at all discounting like other people's sightings or anything like that because
I mean, hell, even deer are known to stand up on their hind legs on occasion and walk like a human, and that's the scariest part. There's a lot of animals that do it, and if you just see random animals that normally walk on their all fours just stand up on their hind legs and start walking short distances, yeah, people are gonna make weird stories about it.
yeah, and I mean, you know me. I've spent a lot of time in the woods, and you spend that much time in the woods, you're eventually gonna see something that you're looking at and going, "What the fuck?"
Like, yeah, even if you spent your whole life out in the woods, you're going to see something you've never seen before.
Yeah,
Like even if you know the area like the back of your hand, there's always going to be something new.
yeah. I spend a lot of time up here in Hickory Run State Park, and there's so much in that state park that stealth camping alone, stuff like that. You're gonna see some shit that you didn't think was fucking possible. But yet, here you are looking at it, freaking deer walking 20 feet on its hind legs or on its front legs. I've seen that too.
Yeah, normally stuff like that normally results in the deer having some kind of having some kind of brain issue, which normally that will result in the deer dying. But other than that, you don't normally see a deer walking on its hind legs unless there's something wrong with it.
Yeah.
There was a couple stories going around where people who were hunting for deer found a deer acting so weirdly that they decided to put it out of its misery and not take it in. But yeah, let's just be honest. If the animal's not acting like its normal behavior, especially if you know that an animal's behavior very well, like most hunters do, you're not gonna eat the meat of that animal. Something's wrong with it.
Now, I do see a lot of things like different ways to get away from a Yeti, so I do want to touch on that. You know, if you ever happen to find yourself in the middle of the woods in the Appalachian Mountains, or not just the Appalachians where I live. Um,
Yeah,
but
we're both of us are in the Appalachian region, and there is even some scary things here. Like you probably know these too. There's a hidden rule that people out here in the Appalachians go by, and it's don't go out in the woods at night.
that's one hidden rule, although I often ignore that hidden rule. The one that I always listen to, if you hear something, no, you didn't.
Especially whistling. If you heard a whistle, no, you didn't. Don't you respond to it? Don't you acknowledge it? Just ignore
Just
it.
close your window and ignore it.
Especially because there are, and this is the scariest thing because I found this out a few years ago when I was doing some research on the area in our general area. There are actual groups of humans just living out there by themselves away from civilization, and it's the creepiest thing ever.
Mm-hmm. I
Like
mean,
we
I
don't
can't
know why
say
these
I
people.
often, I don't say I really blame them, but
I mean, I don't blame them from staying away from the rest of society, but some of the stories I've heard is they're not the nicest of people.
oh yeah, no. But I did want to bring up this. This is another direct excerpt. This is from Earth Stories again. Any Lepcha or Sherpa can tell you that you should run downhill to avoid getting caught by a Yeti. As the animal chases you down a sharp incline, the wind will blow his long hair into his face, or into his eyes, and it's only when he's momentarily blinded that you can give him the slip. They have a vile, pungent odor, and according to local superstitions, they also have supernatural powers. A sighting will inevitably bring you bad luck, ill fortune, or death. I mean, the thing can eat you.
Yeah, if we are going by the fact that it tends to be omnivore like a lot of primates, except for the gorilla.
Yeah.
The gorilla is like one of the few great apes that are surprisingly herbivorous instead of omnivorous, like we are.
Yeah. I mean, don't get that mistaken. I've seen gorillas tear into things too, but usually it's just to protect
Yeah, but
themselves. It's not usually for food.
you generally won't see a gorilla eat something unless they are needing extra protein. Like for example, you'll see a deer sometimes eat a bird or a squirrel because they need the extra calcium or protein because they're just missing it in their diet. There's really no such thing as a complete omnivore. Everything's eating meat at some point.
Yeah.
So apparently the way to get away from one of these guys is to essentially blind it with its own hair.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny to me.
Yeah, that is kind of funny. Blind it with its own hair by running downhill.
And that kind of shows the exact opposite of the story that you read earlier, that they are vicious animals that bring misfortune upon people. It's like the story you just read showed that they are not evil creatures. They'll even sometimes help you if you help it.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I do notice a lot with like even just general lore for any cryptid or any creature really. You're always going to have both sides. You're going to have the side that says they're downright evil, and you're going to have the side that says they're, they're not as bad. That one of the few exceptions that I know of off the top of my head is two of them really is the Skinwalker and the Wendigo. Every story, every account of them that I've ever heard anyway, they just want to eat you.
Yes, the Wendigo's more because it's a curse, not exactly because it's a full-on creature. Now there are stories of both. The Wendigo normally the Wendigo doesn't even do the whole deer skull thing. That's something that the movie Antlers kind of added on to the creature later on. Generally, the original Wendigo was described as a pale humanoid who was very skinny and would follow blizzards.
Yeah.
And a lot of people believe that the Native Americans came up with the Wendigo as a way to prevent people from hoarding food during winter.
I did find another
Okay, fine.
another slight excerpt here from the Lepcha Myth and Folklore of the Yeti section, again on earthstories.com. Right here, that there is a, uh, I guess kind of a superstition that a male could kill you, but seeing a female, Jumpy which is another name for Yeti. There are so many different names for Yeti out there.
It's probably because there's so many different groups of people that are actually in the Himalayan region.
Yeah, that all believe in the same creature, but the superstition, or I guess really not really superstition, but I guess word around the campfire, we'll use that term, is that if you see a female Yeti, means you'll never return empty-handed from your hunt. They whistle, and that's how you know it's them. Which is very different from like a lot of what we hear in the US, where if you hear whistling, it's too fucking late. You're dead.
Yeah. So two completely different, similar things to hear, but completely different outcomes. One's benevolent, and the other's the complete opposite.
Yeah, the other's malicious.
Yeah, that's the word I was thinking of. Malevolent, malicious, one of the two.
There is another part of this lore here for the Lepcha region. That says they are appeased by an offering of ginger, dried bird, and fish. The males can be violent and throw big stones around your shed. You hear a whistle near you, and in a moment you start hearing whistles from all of the mountains around you.
Definitely not what happens here.
No, no. Once you hear the whistle, it's lights out.
Try to get out of Dodge if you can, or just hide.
You're better off just hiding. You might have a slight chance. Unless it's a Wendigo, because, I mean, we'll talk about this in the Wendigo episode, but the Wendigo is pretty much the perfect hunter.
Most legends do seem to think that, especially because their own prey makes more of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a perfect cycle. They cause humans to get starved, and they result in eating another human, which allows the other person to become the mindless monster.
Yeah.
And the cycle just completes. And now I got Circle of Life stuck in my head because of that.
You too? So, one of the things I also wanted to bring up, did you know that the Yetis are actually featured in some ceremonies as well?
Heard of some ceremonies that did involve Yeti, but I haven't actually done much research into that aspect.
Yeah, so the Dimanche ceremonies, a figure called... Okay.
Having a hard time pronouncing it.
RGYADMAGGAG or RGYMAKAG. No thanks.
I have no idea what you just...
A figure called that guards the monastery entrance. The Gamaka? Sure. Gamakag, I think. Sure, we'll go with that. Gamakag is a human who represents a Yeti, and his role is to scare away evil spirits, who are said to be extremely afraid of Yetis. In this performance as a Yeti, the Gamakag wears the conical Yeti scalp kept at the monastery. A sheepskin coat turned with the fur on the outside, and his face painted black. This Yeti also helps to disperse negative forces from the community. This Yeti represents a divine religious ally who is pacific towards humans. I think it's supposed to
When
be
you're talking about
pacifistic.
most likely, are you talking about the when you mentioned the Yeti scalp? Are you talking about the scalp that's headed that's being kept at the Kumjung Monastery?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think they tried doing DNA testing on that, and they figured out that it wasn't Yeti in
No,
origin. I believe
it was sheep in
if I
origin. It's a so the way that this actually says it's a conical yeti scalp kept at the monastery that's a sheepskin coat turned with the fur on the outside.
okay. Originally, they were saying it was actually a Yeti scalp, but I guess when they actually took the hair to do some DNA testing, they figured out what it actually was.
Yeah. I think it's just supposed to represent the yeti, at least from the way that I'm reading this. I could be completely wrong. They could be calling it a yeti scalp and the sheepskin coat's different completely.
They were calling it a Yeti scalp because when the monastery did get it, that's what they were told. So they actually thought it was a real Yeti scalp.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, whoever gave it to them probably conned them because it was either a goat or a sheep hide in nature.
Yeah.
Which honestly is kind of unfortunate because if it was an actual Yeti scalp, it would have immediately proved that hey, there's a giant ape out there because DNA evidence.
Yeah, that would have been really cool. But I think we are just about out of time. We are sitting at 55 minutes. I don't know how long you wanted to go for.
I think around an hour was fine.
Alrighty. We're definitely gonna have to do another episode on this with like different sightings and stuff like that. I just wanted to kind of hit the main like lore factors of this. And
Yeah,
there is
definitely.
so much lore. We could probably do an entire second episode on just the lore alone.
Which honestly, I'm completely down for because the Yeti is one of the more iconic cryptids out there. And it's definitely one of the more fun ones to talk about because of just how much information there is on it.
Yeah.
Especially since so many people from so many different countries. I mean, we had the American government looking into it, and the Nazis back in World War II even tried looking for it.
Yeah, that's and even the Americans have been looking for it recently from some of the articles that I've read lately.
Yeah, they're still doing expeditions, and in order to do it, you need to get some kind of a permit to even do the expedition to look for it.
Yeah.
And in order to release any information, you need to talk to the government first about releasing any information about the animal's discovery. Which is why the U.S. and Nepal set up those rules when it comes to Yeti expeditions.
Yeah. But anyway, I want to thank you for letting me join you in your forest.
Oh, anytime. You are always welcome.
I'm going to head back to my cave now and go slumber for another 3 years.
Oh, it ain't been that long. It's only been 6 months since the first episode.
Alright, I'm going to go slumber for another 6 months.
I will go ahead and tell y'all now the next episode of the podcast will probably be on two very similar creatures, the Wendigo and the Washuge of North America and Canada. So when we get the podcast up and going again for that episode, we will definitely let y'all know.
Absolutely, and I look forward to that episode.
And as always, guys, we will see you all next time.
Don't forget to drink your hot chocolate and sleep well.
Hello everyone, this is the Sleeping Wendigo and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any videos I post. And if you want, you can check out my Twitch, Rumble, second YouTube channel, my Twitter, and merch store. Links to all of these will be in the description down below.
And as always, I will see you all next time.